Hello again. This is Jim McKinnell, Director of the Office of Pre-Health Professions Student Development at the University of New Mexico, and this is Planning for a Career in Healthcare. Well, today is a pretty spectacular day in New Mexico. I hope it is where you are as well. It's gorgeous today. It's the first day that I've walked to work without a jacket and felt safe. Like it's not going to get cold on me. It's not going to rain on me. The winds are pretty calm. It's a beautiful day. It's also we're approaching the end of spring semester, and I know that most of you are in the same situation where the school year is winding down. So I think that anytime we're in a position where the school year is winding down, our thoughts turn to summer and all the great stuff we're going to be doing. Many of you are going to be involved in activities that are related to developing your application for your health professions program. Some of you, many of you likely are going to be working, but I also think you're going to have some downtime. And I hate to think of you with nothing to do and no suggestions for something to read. So today I actually want to take a little bit of time and talk about maybe a summer reading list for you. I'm going to talk about a few books that I've read that I think you might be interested in as well if you're interested in career in healthcare. Before I start with that, though, I want to tell you my day got off to a really great start. I received a text from one of our current medical students here at UNM that just kind of made me smile. His text said, "The shadowing series on your YouTube channel is extremely insightful, even for someone like me who's already in medical school. It helped me check myself about what I should be thinking about when with a preceptor. Thanks for all of your continued help." You know, that's a really nice way to start your day, with an email like that. I'm really happy to get feedback like that. You know, when you're sitting here talking to a phone and know that somewhere it's going to just kind of go out there, it is nice to know that that the information that I'm giving you is a little bit valued, a little bit helpful. So thanks to my student for that feedback, and thanks to all of you again for tuning in and continuing to check out my postings. All right, so let's get on to that reading list. So right now, this is a great time to be interested in medicine. I think it's a great time for anyone to be interested in medicine because we're in somewhat of a golden age. We have some extraordinary writers that are writing about a variety of topics in healthcare, and they're doing it beautifully. And so I wanna share some of the books that I found that I've really enjoyed reading, which I hope I don't know, they might be at least worth checking out for you as well. Sorry, I have to grab my pile of books here. So the first few books that I want to share with you are all written by the same author. And to me, I think this guy maybe is the best guy today writing about issues in healthcare. He happens to be a surgeon by training, and his name is Atul, A-T-U-L, and his last name is Gawande, G-A-W-A-N-D-E. And he writes prolifically. He writes on just a whole range of topics. And frequently his essays, he writes first his essays, and then after he's written enough of them, they're compiled in books like this one called Better. There's one called Complications. And then this is a book of his also, which is very interesting about sort of aging and the end of life issues called Being Mortal. But any writing that Gawande has done is worth a read. And his writing turns up in really interesting and sometimes not totally unexpected, but outside of what you may be thinking of where you're going to find writing about topics in healthcare. Most of his essays appear for the first time actually in the New Yorker magazine. If you're familiar with the New Yorker, you know that it comes out every week. So it's a big. I have a subscription. It's a big commitment because it's a lot of great writing that you receive on your doorstep every week. But most of Gawande's essays appear first in the New Yorker, and then, as I said, after he's written enough, he compiles them, and then they're published in compilations. But compilations are available at any bookstore. But one of the things that I would suggest is that, if you happen to be in a library or you happen to, be at a newsstand, look for a copy of the New Yorker, pick it up, and just scan the table of contents. Because a lot of times, I would say every second or third issue, there's a really interesting article about some issue in healthcare or in medicine. So it's a really, it's a simple and way to broaden your understanding of sort of the scope of the complexity of all of the healthcare professions. So that's my first author recommendation is Atul Gawande. So an excellent, excellent writer. Another author who frequently writes essays that appear for the first time in the New Yorker is an author named Siddhartha Mukherjee. And so his last name is Mukherjee. And so Mukherjee, he sort of hit big with his first book. And this is his first book. It's called The Emperor of All Maladies. And the subtitle on it is A Biography of Cancer. Now, this book for me it's actually one of my personal favorites, but I have to say that I'm very biased on that because even though it's called A Biography of Cancer, really this is the story of some of the earliest innovations and developments in the treatment of childhood cancers. My background as a pediatric oncologist, this story sucked me in immediately. So it's a fascinating read about how some of the early evolution in the treatment of cancer came about. And as you might understand already, medicine's complicated. So not only are there the scientific issues, the medical issues, but medical research is an incredibly political kind of consideration. And so there is also a story woven in about the politics at the time and what it took to get funding for cancer research. And then there's a social aspect of it too. So they also profile some of the personalities that were involved in the quest in those early days. So it's a really, really, it's a wonderful piece of writing and a really engaging story. So again, it's called The Emperor of All Maladies. I have it in hardback. I know now it's available in softback or in ebook probably. So again, a great read. If you like more of a kind of a nail biter whodunit and kind of almost a disaster kind of book, unfortunately, this is that book. So this came out a couple of years ago. It's called 5 Days at Memorial. And the subtitle of this book is Life and Death in a Storm-Ravaged Hospital. And this actually is the story of what happened at Memorial Hospital in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina hit. And it is a story of, it is a disaster story. It's a story of loss of resources and loss of technology. And when our support systems in hospital are so reliant on technology, which needs power, what happens when you lose power? So this is the story of what happened at this hospital. It is a story of both success and failure, but it's really kind of a nail biter. So it's a really interesting read if you just kind of want to sort of another aspect or another angle on some of the challenges of working in and running a hospital. The next book, again, I have a personal connection to this book. This is a really wonderful, it's a little skinny book, so this is nice and a quick read, but it's called The Blood of Strangers. And it's written by a guy named Frank Huyler, Huyler. Frank's written a couple of novels as well, but this is a collection of essays and that he wrote while he was a medical student and also during his residency as an ER in ER medicine. Frank happens to be an ER doc here at the University of New Mexico. I have gotten to know him socially now, and so I really do. I get a little extra kick out of reading his stories because I know him, and he's in his own stories. But it's a quick read, but gives you some insight into the challenges that young medical students face. At least that young Frank Huyler faced, as well as some of the increasing responsibility and the challenges we face as more and more demands are placed on us and we're given more and more responsibility. So it's called The Blood of Strangers, and again, it's a fun read. This next book that I'm going to recommend is a little bit of homework for you. And this book was actually recommended to me a few years ago by a young man who at the time was applying to medical school and ultimately was successful. But it was back in the time of, when the Affordable Care Act was very much on everyone's mind. Unfortunately, it still is on everyone's mind. Back then it was getting it passed, and now unfortunately we're hearing more and more about efforts being made to take it apart. But as people wrestled with that whole issue, the question of how do we provide healthcare, how do we pay for it, what are different means of paying for healthcare, and why is the United States system so screwed up? And it's a really difficult concept. I mean, it's hard to understand. I talk to young students all the time who have a hard time understanding the basic concept of insurance. Well, this author, and his name is T.R. Reid, wrote a book called The Healing of America. And this is an excellent book because I love the fact that it says New York Times bestseller. That tells me somebody's reading it. So in other words, it's written in a way that's accessible to everyone. All right? But then the other thing that's really interesting about this is he actually identifies 5 different models for providing healthcare. And he does this by examining the healthcare systems in 5 different countries. And each country has a different system. But with that, he gives any of us that read this an understanding of different options, different ways that we might, that any society might provide healthcare to its citizens. It also is interesting because it does give you some insights into why we're having such a hard time, because basically the U.S. takes a little bit from all 5 different systems, and yeah, it doesn't work optimally. But it's a great read if you're struggling understanding insurance and you want to feel more secure, especially knowing that you're going into an interview and someone in an interview might ask you a question related to healthcare and how we're going to provide healthcare to individuals and different where it might require a bit of understanding about insurance and what have you. This is great. Resource material. So, and as I said, highly readable. So I recommend that too. Again, it's called The Healing of America. T.R. Reid, R-E-I-D is the author. And the last book that I'm going to recommend for you was published last year, and it is trippy. You'll take it from the title. The title of this book is called The Butchering Art. It's written by a woman named Lindsay Fitzharris. And this book, the subtitle kind of tells it all. It's Joseph Lister's quest to transform the grisly world of Victorian medicine. And basically what this is, an incredibly descriptive tale of what it was like to be a surgeon in the 1800s England, and also to be the patient of a surgeon in 1800s. It was not a happy time. If you needed an operation, good luck. It's scary. But this is an incredibly detailed account of that. It's a little bit gruesome, but it's also, it just makes you shake your head in disbelief, because we've come so far that it's hardly imaginable that the conditions that are described in this book existed, and that's how all of us as individuals received our health care. So again, it's a really entertaining read. It's called The Butchering Art. Lindsay Fitzharris is the author. I have a lot of other books I could talk to you about. I think that's, I don't want to overwhelm you. There's a nice assortment there to pick from for the next couple of months. And I also want to remind you that in addition to sort of picking up the New Yorker periodically and just scanning the table of contents to see if there's anything about medicine, same thing with the Atlantic Monthly, sort of literary type publications. The other thing I also want to remind you to do is read a newspaper. Just this morning, I picked up the Albuquerque Journal, and in the first section, and our first news section is pretty skinny, it's usually 12 or 14 pages long, but in that first news section, there were 6 different stories about different healthcare issues in New Mexico. One of them was about the emergence of a cluster of hepatitis C cases. Another one was how one of the hospitals in Santa Fe is joining the Mayo Clinic system and what that means to healthcare for people in New Mexico. So there are really, really informative articles there, and those are important to be aware of, because that's going to be how you're going to learn about healthcare issues in your community and your state. And again, as you're preparing for different interviews and writing essays for health professions programs, people want to know you know that. All right, I'm going to stop. Thank you again for tuning in. This is Jim McKinnell, Director of the Office of Pre-Health Professions Student Development at the University of New Mexico, and this is Planning for a Career in Healthcare. I'll see you next time.